Do you also have an internal tyrant in your head that is always telling you what you should do and how to improve your life? And is it fighting with the reality of what your biological body actually does? You always try to improve yourself, but your body still wants to do whatever it wants to do. Or your mind convinces you into doing the easy thing all the time. I want you to tell the solution that I've discovered from a more spiritual existentialist lens, while also incorporating the scientific reality of your biological body. So I have a giant obsidian vault, which is just a place where I put in all my notes and everything that I've learned, all journal entries and information about consciousness and reality and the work that I do. It has accumulated now for 4 years, I think. So when I look at my journal entries from 2002 to 2025, I can see a pattern repeating itself through the years. And it always has been an internal narrative that argues with myself about whether what I do is good enough. From 2022 to 2025, there always were conversations about how to be a better person. And when I say conversations, I mean personal reflections. How to wake up early and be more productive, focus on my health and be less distracted. This really boils down to the main problem of our modern times. It's this inability to control our own intentions and the way we live our life. And over the years, I've seen significant improvement with everything that I've learned. Like I see a big change from where I started when I started this at the year 2022. And I understand now what improvement really looks like. And it's different than how I thought about it back then. Because the problem we have is that we do not treat the body for what it really is. And we don't treat the mind for what the mind really is. At the end of the day, the mind is really a problem-solving machine. And if you don't pay attention, it will always find a new problem to solve, just so that it can fulfill its function. And more so than a problem-solving machine, it tries to predict the future. It wants to know what is going to happen next. And what will you do next? What this means that it makes up a ton of problems too. You start to create systems and ideas and journal entries to prevent problems that are not actually there yet because you're planning out your day or you're planning out your life. And this then gives you the feeling that you can predict where your life is headed, but then it ends up failing. And then you beat yourself up for not being able to predict yourself right. And then you call it lack of discipline or lack of control. I know that there's sincere value in self-reflection and system building, but after a short while, planning and thinking about how to have like a more productive life has diminishing returns. Because everything moves around in circles and you don't really get anywhere. Especially if you use an AI for self-reflection. You're not going to be challenged by the AI in the way you need to, because the challenge often requires you to think outside of the system that you are constructing, which is something that current AIs don't do. They basically stay stuck within your own system that you're building through your own words and the model that it has been trained on. So it tends to give you the same information over and over again. And it's not that it's wrong necessarily, but it also doesn't really change anything. You still are the same person. You just have invented a new word salad in order to contextualize it. That's why I think there's a lot of value in a deep, sincere community that helps each other with these deep existential topics, because it is actually another person's perspective. It's not the same as talking to a machine or some random people that have no association with you. AIs also have the same principle as being a predictions problem-solving machine. So in all sense and purposes, it is really a mirror of ourselves. And they also try to predict what comes next. So what I've done is I've fed all my journal entries into a private AI and basically asked it for an overview. And I could clearly see that depending on which days it picked, the AI saw a person that is super ambitious and extremely happy and content and very productive, building its own business. And if I ask the AI, how can I improve myself, or what are the issues, what are the struggles in these notes, then the AI sees an unproductive stoner who wastes too much time getting distracted on the internet and then trying to solve this problem. So the AI makes something very interesting when I fed it all this data, because it showed how easy it is to weave narratives around yourself, depending on which facts about yourself you pick. It beautifully illustrates how you can have a fact that then becomes a story that puts you into a prison because you connected multiple facts into a narrative, a story. For example, you could have the idea that you eat sugar and therefore become foggy and less productive, which is like a typical productivity idea. And you might actually notice this within yourself too. So the days that you have eaten more junk food, you have been more lazy. Okay, there might be real biological truth behind this, but correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. And then what can end up happening is that you tell yourself a story about why or that it is bad that you've eaten sugar again, and that this storytelling itself causes you to associate eating sugar with being less productive. And then by doing this, basically you tap into the version of yourself, into the identity of yourself that is worse and less productive, because you've constructed a story of facts that tell you that this is how you're supposed to act when you do unproductive things. And that's the issue with all self-improvement. It implies that there's something specific to improve that isn't good enough, and then it creates a story around that. And this story itself is the problem. You can also be productive and eat sugar. You're not bound by it, but you're taking yourself the freedom away by creating a narrative of the mind that tells you you're limited in some way. And it's not that there's no cause and effect. It's not that the sugar doesn't have a real influence in your body, but it's not the story of what it does to you. You just have, a number of facts that, this has happened at this day, this happened at this day, but you're not bound to it. Your future isn't determined because of these facts. Another example is that I might have the story in my head that I need to wake up early in the morning so that I can get most of my work done. Because personally, when I wake up at 5 in the morning, I feel genuinely great. I love those days. And then it's like 2 o'clock and I have all my work done. I've been super productive. I love these days. And then I had this for like a month, did this every day, and then entered a new phase where this stopped working for me for whatever reason. And this wasn't necessarily 2025. Like the problem that I'm going to tell you is more like a 2023, 2024 problem. But in these years, then I had the narrative in my head that whenever I woke up late, the day was already ruined because I didn't have my ideal routine down. So the day started at 10 o'clock, and then basically I failed. The day is over. I cannot work anymore. And then this becomes the subtle feeling of discomfort that, something isn't good enough, or there's something that you need to do to be a better version of yourself, more acceptable version of yourself. And then it is tied to just one little fact. And then there can come a narrative that you're lazy and you're just not doing enough. And it's basically because you are trapping yourself into some sort of ideal. It becomes an excuse to do less and an excuse to argue yourself why you're not good enough. And then you don't even enjoy the rest of the day either. The conditions aren't what they are supposed to be. But this doesn't mean that now you are not free to choose what comes next. So I've learned to see myself as an operating system with multiple systems or programs running at the same time. It's the body and the mind. It's ultimately one, but it's hardware and software. And it's all me, but they do have different functions and different effects. There are different aspects of the mind with different goals and intentions. There's one part of me that wants to build an amazing community for existentialists and seekers, and to be the best existential guide I can possibly be. And there's this other part of my mind that just wants to chill out and coast around and be content and happy all the time and not do anything with my life. Because this part of me really doesn't need to be productive. It doesn't need to do anything to be content. which honestly is kind of the consequence of this existential work. If you really integrate all of your traumas and all of your mental problems and your social conditionings, well, you end up at a place of unconditional love and acceptance. And this also makes it so that you don't really have the teeth of the ego that makes you want to conquer the world and be like this super productive mastermind. So then for a while, these parts started fighting with each other. The thing is, the moment you start fighting with one part of the mind, well, now there is the narrative that can be formed. Now there is the problem that is caused. There comes a narrative of internal conflict, something being wrong that needs fixing, because now you are pretending that a part of your mind shouldn't be there. But actually, you're just rejecting a part of yourself. So, of course, you end up fighting yourself forever because what is there doesn't really need to be solved. You are just dissatisfied with who you are and then attributing your identity to whatever you do. But the question you must ask yourself is, does it make any sense to destroy an aspect of yourself or to not accept an aspect of yourself? Can you just argue against it and make it disappear? Because I'm certain that in your own experience, this hasn't worked. Not, at least not by brute force. And in my coaching, I don't really focus on discipline. Like, I'm not a discipline coach. I do existential work for like existential freedom. And the idea is that you are satisfied without needing the discipline or without having to be this ideal person. But anyway, the topic of discipline is still important and usually comes up when working deeply with somebody and investigating the nature of the ego. And I know that always the problem is some internal fighting with two parts of the ego that makes the progress difficult. Just one part fighting against what the other wants to do. And often there can be some trauma-related reason behind this that needs to be integrated and looked at honestly, like some bad experience that is making you behave in this unproductive way. And then it's also natural to want to solve it because it's just making your life more miserable when it shouldn't be. But it's not about the actual discipline. It's actually about how do you relate to yourself in your life. And then when you relate to yourself in a positive and comfortable way and you unify whatever these two parts were fighting against, then you actually feel quite content and happy no matter what you do. So either you believe that you can't get what you truly desire, like you have a desire that you really want and you don't believe that you can get it, or you deny that what you really want is what you really want, so you kind of forget about it and go into some sort of autopilot and then build a story that kind of justifies these kind of entrapments. And people are often scared to figure these things out about themselves because then the things actually change. You actually have understood how you work and why you work how you work. It doesn't mean you have magical control about everything you do, but you can have peace in understanding how your organism works. For me, for example, the most productive days have just been the days where I had set a clear intention and then I focused on not distracting myself from set intention. For example, today I want to finish a YouTube video, and then I wake up and this is like in my mind. And in order to then make this intention work, it requires to design my life around it. Like, I know I don't have some magical extreme willpower where I just do everything out of nowhere, but usually I know the things that I can do that serve this goal. And I'm going to go into more depth later on this, on what works exactly for me. But the point is that it requires to design my life around what I want to accomplish. So I cannot just trust on some magical willpower, but I know that if I do certain things, I behave in one way or the other. And this is a very grounding realization because it puts you back into your biology. You are a flesh automaton animated by neurotransmitters. There's a biological reality of your dopamine receptors and your hormones and a huge mix of biochemistry that is governing everything you do. Not like a tiny bit, but almost everything. And to feel guilty for having followed a pattern of your own biology and then beating yourself up for not being good enough is really a ghost of the mind. It's a sickness of the mind. It doesn't make any sense. You are a biological organism. It's like a plant feeling bad about itself because it's not growing into the right direction. It actually doesn't make sense at all. And you, as the awareness of these processes, can only really observe them. The control you have is really in training your ability to pay attention to what it is your body really wants. And by extension, what your mind is trying to distract yourself with, what your mind wants. You cannot really be localized in one specific aspect of your body, but you are the thing that can stop an impulse instead of following it. And you do this by being aware and paying attention to the impulse. That's what our consciousness is really doing. It's a self-organizing principle, and it is organizing around everything that is happening around you, especially what is happening in your body. So it's not about impulse control in some magical free will way, but you don't fall into some fatalistic determinism by noticing what is actually going on. That's what awareness does. That's what consciousness does. It has the ability to understand what is happening. And often what we do is, because something feels uncomfortable, we don't want to investigate it and automatically fall into an addiction. And this addiction is the way we don't need to use our awareness. We don't need to use our consciousness to understand what is going on. We just do it automatically. And then we depend on this addiction to never be aware of what is actually going on. And this then often gets us into this weird sense of kind of comfort, but also discomfort, because you know something is wrong. And then there is where the narrative starts that says you're not good enough, and it becomes this cyclical loop of unproductivity and doom, where you just beat yourself up and re-traumatize yourself with your own failures. And it's really the story itself that causes the sense of failure, because you're not able to just have a clean slate and just start new. But now it's just like, I failed 5 times. Is it going to work the 6th time? And the answer is it can, but you need to believe that it actually can. So if you look deep into how you behave and how people are cyclical creatures and tend to do the same things again and again, then you start to understand how the body as a biological organism is kind of like something that carves away, like it carves pathways into your own mind, and by extension into the world. You do the same things again and again, and you have a certain momentum. The more you do the same thing, the more often you're going to do the same thing until you get tired of it. Now, existential freedom, like real freedom, is not about controlling in which direction all of this goes, but it's actually happiness and contentment independent of external circumstances. This means also to be content and satisfied with yourself, even when you fall into the addiction, even when you're not doing what you're supposed to do. This means that you'll love yourself each day, no matter what happens. No matter if you feel your plan worked, or if you met your quota, or if you are just stupidly following your addictions and being a degenerate. You still don't judge yourself. You still don't weave a narrative about your being something. You just be aware and be conscious for what it is like to be in this situation or this person or in this moment. And you might instinctively feel that this is dangerous. Like, wait, if I just accept all my degeneracies and my addictions and all the ways I judge myself and everything that is bad about me, am I not just giving myself the permission to follow through with all of my bad habits forever? And the answer is, yeah, you do. Yes, that's the point. Because now you're actually honest with what you actually want, where you're actually moving towards, where your biology is actually moving you towards, or where your mind is actually moving you towards. And then you can own this and say, yeah, this seems to be what I want to be doing. And then you can actually pay attention to the process of actually going through with it and see, is this really what I actually want? How does it feel like if I actually embody this person that can't stop smoking all day? Like, is this satisfying? Is it nice? And if you're actually aware and conscious of your experience, you might notice it's actually quite pleasant, or I actually hate this. I don't want to do this. And then without fighting internally, you naturally move to what comes natural to you, like what feels right to do, because it just makes you more content. If you honestly see that what you're doing is making you miserable, then the logical reason is to not follow whatever makes you miserable. The only way you are preventing from doing this is a lack of consciousness or a lack of awareness of what is it that you actually want to do. Wanting something or not wanting something is, at the end of the day, what moves you. If you want to change, you will change, as some sort of like cosmical truism. When I say want or will, it's like the matter itself, or like the biological organism itself, moves itself into a certain direction. So I'm using it almost like descriptively. So within this container, there's an awareness there that can pay attention to what it wants. Either do more of it or do less of it. As long as you are aware of these wants, you can actually stir them into the direction that feels good to you. And it often won't align with some perfect productivity schedule that the internet has told you you're supposed to do. It doesn't mean that you have to wake up at 5 in the morning just because you told yourself at some point that this is what you're going to do forever now. What I'm arguing for is that the attention you take on the things you do is the only thing that really matters. And this is where true spirituality happens too. It's where true life satisfaction happens, and where productive work happens as well. Because now you don't do things because you have to, but because they're just enjoyable to do. Or at least they're not making you miserable. They're having some sort of purpose, which relates back to the idea of having a community of people where all of them share the same goals. But a mistake is to stay just on the spiritual level, trying to manifest your dream reality or accept yourself unconditionally on its own doesn't work to actually make the goals happen, to actually accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. The spiritual level is there to make you content no matter what happens, and in this way you open up the possibility for amazing things to happen to you, which goes back to this idea of manifesting, right? You let the universe guide you through what you actually want, which is somewhat true, but it's because of biological and physical reasons, not because of some sort of magic. Because now you have nobody that is fighting against what you want, what you actually want. So you need to understand your biology. How do the actual atoms of your body function and interact with each other? What in your brain makes you prefer one thing over the other? And a lot of this is also individual. Like, biology is relatively homogeneous. Like, we are humans, we need sleep, we need healthy food, we need to work out. But again, like the story crafting thing, right? Do you need this to be happy? Do you need this to accomplish your goals? No. It depends on what works for you. And there it only can, this only can be figured out with experimentation and exploration. So I can tell you what has worked for me, but yeah, it doesn't mean that this is how you should live your life or that this is how it's going to work for you. But it does apply general principles of biology. So if you trained your body to not fall asleep when you're very tired, because you carved neural pathways in your brain that have repeated the same thing again and again. Like, okay, I feel sleepy. I'm talking from experience here. This now is the call out. So I feel sleepy, and instead of going to bed, I start smoking because it gives me more dopamine and more excitement, and then I feel super nice. So now the next day, I'm more tired, I have less sleep, so I'm more likely to do the same decision again the same night, and it's more likely that I'm being less focused in doing work. So by repeating this again and again, I'm creating a biology that is not working on its higher capacity. And to look at this and to see, okay, is it worth the trade-off? Do I want to keep living like this? Do I not want to keep living like this? Like, this is then a personal choice. depending on what benefits or costs do I want to have. But there's nothing in there that needs to judge one thing as better or worse, or being yourself as better or worse. But just what are your actual goals? What do you are aiming for? And then to kind of also accept that, yeah, the body has its own rhythm, and it's going to be difficult to change your rhythm like this if you've been operating for this rhythm for a while. Weed is such a good example for me because it's the thing that I most struggled with in my life. And I've got so much better at managing this drug. But I also still notice that, yeah, I'm still a biological creature. And despite being now happy and content and not using the drug as a crutch anymore as I used when I was way younger, it still activates the same dopamine receptors that I just want to stay up late and eat sugary food. It has not changed. And it's just the biological reality of what substance does to my body, and also what I trained the substance to do to my body in a way too. And now to do something else requires a lot of effort to carve new pathways into my mind. Now, through awareness, and I know this also from experience, I still can smoke and then go to bed at an early time. It's not impossible. It's just that I need to be aware that it's much more difficult because it requires way more awareness and way more skillful, like a more skillful way of living to be conscious of these consequences. And then to do this consistently would require me to do this for a long period of time, to carve this into my biological programming. So the more I shifted to a biological understanding, I've been able to carve out a life that I want to live, and to live in a way that serves me long term. And I don't need to judge myself in falling short, because over these 4 years, I've seen a clear trend towards happiness and productivity and a life with purpose. And yeah, it's a trend over years that actually constructs your life. It's not what happens on one day or on a week, or what narrative you even want to write about yourself for 1 year. You can always pick and choose your facts about what story you want to tell yourself. And at the end, what I ended up doing with my journal too is I actually just asked it for all of the things that have served me. Like, what was everything that made my life in 2025 better? And then it shifted from, just looking at the internal conflicts to, okay, this is what served you. And I think this is such a good reframing, to not try to fix the problems that your mind comes up with, but to try to predict, okay, what would actually make me feel better? What would just serve me? And then instead of trying to run away from sort of problem, you're way more satisfied just aiming for something better. And in this way also, I lost this idea of grandiose purpose and settled into much more present joyfulness. So instead of imagining, oh, I have this big goal that I want to accomplish, it's just like, okay, I actually enjoy working. I actually enjoy talking to people and making these videos and guiding others. And now it's the difference between play and work starts to crumble a bit, because it's all just me living my life. It all ends up kind of being the same. So it's like, instead of egoic hunger, it's more like a cold satisfaction. So the presence that spirituality teaches you, and to free yourself from the mind and be in the moment and make life like play, is also what makes productivity fun. It's also what makes work happen. It's also what makes you satisfied and content in the moment while still striving for a multi-million-dollar empire. The contradiction there only exists in a narrative. There's a clean satisfaction of a simple task well done. I've also written a structured article on my Substack about how to integrate the biological reality and the existential desire to become free. Check that out.